Good to be back. Hello and welcome here on the Boutique Retouching channel. This is the first video since we rebranded the channel, and I want to spend the time today talk a little bit about the issue of color management when it comes to looking at images on the web. But before we can get to talk about the issues, we have to talk about color management and color spaces. What are color spaces? So we have established a certain language and knowledge before we can problem solve. So you as a photographer or retoucher probably know that different color spaces exist, and there are a bunch of them. So what does it mean to use one or the other? In color management, we usually define different types of devices, which are on one hand input devices and on the other hand output devices. Each come with certain capabilities in terms of capturing or reproducing color. So on one hand we have input devices, on the other hand we have output devices. A camera or a scanner would be a typical input device, and its color space or color gamut is defined by all the colors it can capture. For a DSLR, that usually is in the realm of 12 or 14-bit image depth, and a medium format camera can capture up to 16-bit. And then we have, on the other hand, output devices, which have another set of capabilities which are vastly different from our input color space. So what does this mean to you is you never handled your color in terms of your input color space. It is handled by the raw file itself and your raw converter. But when you go into Photoshop, you have something that is called their working space, and there you can choose different color spaces. Usually these are set in your camera raw standard settings, and some use srgb, others use Adobe RGB or even ProPhoto RGB, and they have different gamuts. And the color gamut is basically defining the amount of colors that are present in a color space. And srgb and Adobe RGB are device independent color spaces, so they exist not limited by the capabilities of a device per se. So they are by humans defined, so to speak. And yeah, srgb is a rather small color space, and Adobe RGB is a larger color space, and ProPhoto is even larger. So these device independent color spaces have been created by humans to define certain specifications. And for example, srgb, which we will talk here the most because it still is the most relevant, has been defined as the most common color space or the most common colors for output devices or display devices to reproduce, which means these are the colors that most devices are capable of displaying. So srgb is a common color space for display devices still, and we have larger color spaces. And larger color spaces usually have been created because cameras can capture a lot more color information than display devices that are capable of displaying the standard srgb. And when working in a larger color space, you're not throwing away all your colors, because for example you might want to print them at a high color gamut printer, inkjet printer, and therefore you will want to preserve all the colors and work with the colors that are present in your image while you were capturing it. So that is the two different types of, like, when we talk about smaller or srgb, a larger gamut is usually everything that is a bigger gamut than srgb. So as we now have established this, let's get into the 3 most common issues we have with color management. So when you are exporting images, you always want to make sure to export a specific file for a specific purpose. So if you are exporting images, you always want to make sure you are using the specifications for the output device that you want it to be displayed on or be printed on. For a printer, that can be smaller color spaces like CMYK color spaces, or a large color space for a wide gamut color printer, or a display type. But for displays, there are different types of displays. Professionals use wide gamut displays, while average users usually have only a device that is capable of displaying sRGB files. So the first thing that can go wrong is when you are looking at images on your browser that they look washed out. This can have 2 different reasons. So reason number 1 is large color space, not converted to sRGB and not embedded the profile. Then your browser will interpret it as sRGB, which is much smaller, so all the colors shift into more desaturated colors. Scenario number 2. You have worked in a larger color space, which is quite common, and have exported your file in a larger color space, not sRGB, but remembered to embed your profile into your file. So what can happen then is either when you upload it, the system you are using is discarding all the metadata and color information, and then it also gets displayed as sRGB and all the colors will shift towards more desaturated. But also it could be that the color is properly embedded, but the browser a person is using is not capable of color managing. In the recent years, browsers have made quite some progress, and in 2019 now, most browsers are capable of color managing and reading color information. Some are still lagging behind, like Microsoft Edge, and for Firefox you have to specifically go into the settings and activate color management engine, and we will get into this a little bit later, how you do that in Firefox. So reason number 2, you have worked in a larger color space, not converted to sRGB, and have embedded the profile. Again, 2 different scenarios: either the color has been discarded, or your browser is not capable of reading the color profile, the color information, and how to interpret it. So scenario number 3, you have done everything correctly, you stuck to working in a larger color space, mapped everything down to sRGB, put it on the web, and all of a sudden your image looks super saturated. So what's going on there? What happens is you probably are one of the few that own a more capable display, and what happens there, your file is in a small or sRGB, and your browser or the application you're using is not able to color manage. So in this scenario, you do not have to interpret the colors correctly, but the colors have to be mapped to the capabilities of your display. And what happens here is you have a certain number, and that number represents a smaller gamut, but the engine doesn't know you have wider gamut displays, so they are not remapped there. And we will just get into what you can do there. For once, it's usually a good idea to update your browser. Then on our website we have a browser test. So on our blog, when you go to boutiqueretouching.com/browser color, we'll have all of the description of this post and video on there, and there's also a test which will let you know if your color engine is activated, if your browser is capable of displaying the colors correctly. And from there, if you established if your browser is color managed or not, you can decide to, for once, choose another browser, update your browser, or in terms of Firefox, go through the process of activating the color engine and mapping your monitor profile to it, so your colors are really precise on the web as well. So yeah, these are the 3 most common issues. So let me just go over all the 3 possibilities again. So possibility number 1, you have not exported an sRGB and not embedded the profile, then it's the worst case and things are pre-programmed to go wrong. Second, you have exported in a larger color space and have embedded the correct profile, and then potentially someone who is looking at the image does not use a browser or application that can read the color profile, and then things also might go wrong. And reason number 3, you have mapped down to sRGB and have embedded the sRGB profile and things still look too saturated, then probably your browser is not color managed or it's not activated, and you can now make a decision what you want to do: update, change your browser, or go through the process for Firefox to activate the color engine. And now let's jump right into the Firefox browser and I show you how to activate the color engine there. And yeah, see you in a bit. So, and here we are at my desktop, or on my desktop. I have this little window open for some settings. We need them later. So first thing we need to do to enable color management is to go to a Firefox tab and type about:config, and we are greeted by this little warning that we might void our warranty. We do not care, so we just accept it. And then we get into the console of all the settings of Firefox. And as there are literally thousands of settings, we need to filter them out. What we care about is color management, so we type in color underline management, and then there are 4 settings left. 3 of them we will change, but let me just quickly set it to the default settings. The first setting here is color management display profile. We will be changing that later on. Second variable is color management enabled for version 4, which by default is set to false, so it's disabled. And then we have color management modes. There are 3 modes available. 0, the value 0 gives you no color management. The value 1 activates color management for all images and fields, no matter if they are tagged or untagged. And integer 2 value gives you color management just for tagged images. And color management rendering intent is at 0, and we are going to leave it at 0 because 0 is perceptual. So what we need to change is color management mode. We will change this to 1, which means we are going to activate color management for all values, color values. And we will change color management enabled version 4 to be true. And then we need to go to our display profile. Here we need to enter the full path of our profile. So I am using display cal, and my profiles are stored in the app data roaming folder, and then you have to select your ICM profile, and we need the full path including the file name. Now that we know where our display profile is, we can copy the folder structure and file name into the Firefox setting for the display profile and hit enter, and then nothing has changed just yet. So let me just show you what happens. I just open up our website and just see how oversaturated still the images look, and that's all over the board because we have to close Firefox for the settings changes to take effect. So let's quickly close all the Firefox windows and open up a new session. Of course, the windows I had open are loading again, so we can check our settings and go to the website again, and you see all the colors have changed towards normal, the less saturated state. And look how they're supposed to look like. Checking it again in full view, and all is looking good and as it's supposed to. So that is how you activate color management. And just a quick side note, on our website we have our podcast here that you can check out, but also when you go to learn and our blog, we have helpful articles like camera calibration for Capture One, which recently has been introduced, and you can read all about that. So that's it about color management. I hope you liked this video. If you found it helpful, give us a thumbs up. If you have not subscribed to the channel, subscribe. And if you know anyone who is working with images, share the video. I guess this might be helpful to them as well. And see you in the next video.